can just mend it with your iron, just melt it into itself. It's brilliant. It's
I'd like to
resistant to chemicals.
Alex ironing his boat off. You don't even iron your shirts. I can't see you ironing a boat.
Dare you? That tomato stain down there as well. Welcome to episode 8 of Boat Nuts, a podcast dedicated to all things boaty. This is Boat Nut number 1, Hugo Andreae, editor of Motorboat and Yachting magazine, and I'm Boat Nut number 2, Alex Smith, deputy editor. So Hugo, where are we today?
We are down at Ocean Village Marina in Southampton on a particularly gorgeous day.
Beautiful, isn't it? And what kind of boat are we on?
This is a Fairline Squadron 58, belongs to Approved Boats. It is a stock boat and is for sale for £2.6 million ex VAT.
Yeah, fantastic boat, slightly out of my budget, but we've got a boat to talk about today, and it is the Sunseeker Ocean 156.
Absolutely correct. Even further out of your budget, but very interesting nevertheless.
Yeah, exactly so. We'll also be talking about a product, and today that's going to be portable electric outboards, which are very much within my budget to a degree.
Yeah, definitely, and really interesting bits of kit.
And our final issue of the day is going to revolve around boat building materials. There's plenty of different types of material to build your boat from these days, so we'll be discussing those and picking our favourites.
Absolutely, the pros and cons of both, and some of the best examples of boats built out of them.
Fantastic. Let's get downstairs and get started.
Let's do that thing.
Well, our boat for this month is a bit of a beast. It's the Sunseeker Ocean 156, a boat that I saw you testing, Hugo, while I was on the Predator 55, just going back from the Southampton Boat Show.
You're absolutely right. It was launched at Southampton last year, 2024, and a really interesting boat.
Yeah, from my perspective on the Predator 55, I'd say it was interesting, not necessarily in a good way, because it didn't look very sexy from almost any angle. I found maybe one angle where I thought, that's not bad. And then the rest I was thinking, oh.
No, fair enough. It is not what you traditionally think of as a Sunseeker. It's not a long, thin, pointy, high-performance thing. It is one of these new tri-deck designs, which have suddenly sort of gained a certain amount of momentum. I think it's probably fair to say that Princess was the first to really grasp that particular nettle and create a tall Superfly, they called it at the time.
They did,
Superfly. It is 3 decks below 100 feet. That is a lot of volume, a lot of height.
It is. And in fairness, that original Princess X95, that kind of shocked people with its aesthetic as well, didn't it?
Absolutely. I think people were really taken aback by it and didn't quite know what to make of it. But I think things have moved on. I think, like everyone, they've responded to the market. And if the market was wanting more volume and more space within well, I say limited, but, below 100 feet and nevertheless within that, particularly the 24 meter load line length that makes such a difference to regulations, it does enable you to get that much more space. It's effectively a whole extra deck.
It's true. We've seen that appetite for volume reflected in the rise of the Power Cat, which we talked about a couple of podcasts ago. But in terms of that Princess X95, well, it achieved its trick by having a full beam superstructure that went a long way forward with a very short bow. So how is Sunseeker approaching that same kind of challenge?
Well, I think what I really like about their boat is that they have fully embraced it and designed that boat from the off as a full tri-deck design, because they've sort of played around with the idea before. They started off with their Ocean 90, which had a lot of extra beam for a relatively, or for at least in relation to its length. Yeah. This has exactly that, has a really wide beam, but they've also gone up and designed it as a tri-deck from the offset. And the difference with that is that they've then got a really nice balance between inside and outside space. And for me, that was one of the problems with some of the early designs, and particularly their Ocean 182, where they stuck an extra little saloon sort of sky deck on top. But that compromised a lot of the other parts of the boat, and it never really felt like you had a good balance between inside and outside space. Whereas this boat, I think, just works so much harder and so much better. You've got that enclosed sky deck and helm. And of course, one of the advantages of having an enclosed helm on the upper deck is then that frees up the main deck. So you only need the one helm rather than two. Normally you lose space. You have one in the saloon and one on the flybridge. This way you can have enclosed helm on the upper deck. So the main deck is completely freed up, but they've also got outside space both sides of that sky deck. So you've got an aft raised cockpit and you've got a forward raised cockpit. And essentially you still get all the space, or pretty much all the space you get on an open flybridge, but you've also got that enclosed skydeck saloon, plus the helm up there, and crucially, you've got a completely unencumbered main deck. So it's all on one level. You've got no helm or bulkheads inside at all. So you have this fantastic open plan space on the main deck, pretty much full length. You've got doors at either end, so you can come in both ends. You can go out to the foredeck. It's totally surrounded by glass. And because of that extra beam, the proportions feel completely different. I always kind of think particularly on sort of long boats of sort of 80, 90 feet, because they need to be relatively narrow, or they traditionally are relatively narrow in the beam compared to the length, it feels a little bit like the main deck is a bit of a sort of tunnel sometimes.
Like a corridor. I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
And sure, it's got some space for everything, but because of the extra few feet you've got on the beam of this, the proportions feel much more like a really nice kind of seaside apartment or something. Yeah,
well, that opens up a range of really quite satisfying options for the owner, doesn't it? But before we get to that, can you just clarify the kind of protocol behind the naming of the boat? Because this is the Ocean 156 is an 82-footer, right?
Yes. Yes, I should have pointed that out earlier on. Very easily to be confused by that. You look at it and think, oh my God, 156-foot boat, not going there. No, this refers to the gross tonnage.
Yeah.
So it's a measurement of the internal volume. It's a bit of a technical thing, and I don't think you need to get too hung up on it, but it's basically measuring the internal volume of the boat, and relative to its length, that is a very high measurement.
Yeah.
So it's only 82 foot long, relatively speaking, for the amount of space you get inside it, it is extraordinary.
Yeah, that's why they try to foreground it, because that's its USP, isn't it? It's massive for a boat of that length.
So it's not equivalent to 156 foot, but for an 82 foot boat, it feels much more probably on a par with sort of something 95 or 100 feet.
And just to put that beam in
really
perspective,
does.
I mean, that is 2 feet wider in the beam than the X80, isn't it? So it is a huge beam.
It is. It's a really big beam for that length of boat. But it's also, as you say, it's how they use the space.
Yeah.
And because you've got no bulkheads, you've got the sort of vista all the way around. You've got 360-degree views, front, side and back. You've got no helm blocking that space. And it also gives them enormous versatility in how it's laid out. So that open plan main deck, you can have the galley in the middle, and then you can have a sort of dining area at the stern and a saloon area forward, or you can swap it all round and have the galley at the stern end. And crucially, it means you can have a main deck owner's cabin.
People love that, don't they?
And they do. And I totally get that, because particularly if you're relatively new to boating, when you sleep on a boat for the first time, it's quite disconcerting, because there's the movement, but there's also the noise. You know, even if you sleep in a really lovely mid cabin on a big sort of 80-foot boat, it's surprisingly sort of noisy, because you get all this sort of weird gurgling and slapping.
Are we sinking?
Exactly. And it just
that,
disturbs your sleep if you're not used to it. Whereas the beauty of a main deck cabin is that you're obviously elevated from the hull itself, so you don't get any noise from the hull. You have the privacy, you have the views, because you're that much higher.
You often, with that kind of arrangement, when you spec the main deck owner's cabin forward, you have kind of a private access to a forward terrace of some sort.
Absolutely.
Is that what you get?
And you do, absolutely. So the foredeck terrace then becomes your own little private deck. And it's, a really lovely thing. And of course, it frees up the whole lower deck then for your guest cabin. So you can have 4 really lovely guest cabins down below, plus that 5th cabin on the main deck where you are. So you've got massive amounts of space. You can have loads of people on there. Again, great for chartering. If you want to charter a boat, you've got 5 really good double cabins.
Great for chartering, really. If you've got the main deck owner's cabin and you've got 4 down below, the first person to arrive with his suitcases is whacking them on the bed in their main deck owner's cabin.
Well,
I mean, you want a kind of egalitarian split between equally.
Yeah, but relatively speaking, it is, because you still get that huge VIP cabin.
Course,
what was then the owner's cabin becomes a huge VIP cabin. And probably floor space wise, it might even be bigger.
Yeah.
So yes, you get the extra elevation. But all 4 of those cabins, and again, because of that beam, usually on a boat that size, because you're trying to squeeze 2 cabins into the same sort of width of hull, which on a normal size of beam, it means you get 2 relatively small cabins. Again, because of that extra width, you can get 2 cabins within that segment of boat, if you like, and they're both a really good size.
Yeah, but before we get to the other positive stuff, which is all up on the flybridge, love that sort of 3-part flybridge that you got going on there. It's fantastic in a practical perspective. But what about the crew cabin? That's a bit limited, isn't it?
It is, yeah. There's always a compromise somewhere on board the boat. And the crew cabin is relatively small for a boat of that size, certainly of that volume. But, it is a boat that you can have an owner operator. It's below the 24 metre load line length. So you absolutely can skipper that yourself if you want to. I think you are going to need at least one crew member to help with fenders and lines and cleaning. Apart from anything else, there's an awful lot of glass to get around and clean. So yeah, it's a bit of a compromise, but I guess the bottom line is that's probably not your top priority when you're the owner and the buyer.
No, indeed. And I've got to say, any boat of this type, ever since the Princess X95, my natural spot on board, if I were the owner, would be go up onto the top deck and just head behind that central sort of wheelhouse and nestle against the superstructure when you're underway. Just that sort of sheltered bit on the aft part of the flybridge.
Yeah.
That you don't, you go up to a flybridge generally and it's windswept wherever you happen to sit. In the lee of that structure, it's a great spot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely because you do get the protection. Rather than an open flybridge, you've got a nice shelter space behind the enclosed section. But also on this boat, you have got that lovely area in front of it. You can fit a hot tub up there.
Oh,
if you're worried about getting a little chilly, you could flick on the hot tub, sit there with your bubbles, literally bubbles in the bath and bubbles in your glass. And very lovely place to hang out. But yeah, it does, to me, it is more like an apartment on the water. The fact that you can move it is a great bonus, and you can move it from marina to marina. You can choose wherever you want to hang out. But as a place to stay on board, and I will agree with you, it's probably prettier looking out from inside than outside in, but it's a lovely place to spend time on board. Yeah,
I just want to, before we finish with the Sunseeker, I just want to kind of revisit the notion of the power cat. I do, because some of the reasons you would buy this Sunseeker with all its volume would be the same reasons you would go for a boat like the Silent SY80, a big bruising power cat with a huge 36-foot beam, 14 or 15 foot more in the beam, even than the Sunseeker. So, Yeah,
but a lot of that is lost because you've got the space between the hulls.
Yeah,
and the beauty of this is you've got all that volume across all that beam on all three layers of the boat effectively. So you have, and you're not taking up two spaces in the marina. You're still fitting in, it's a beamier than the average boat, but you're still likely to be able to find a berth that you can slot that into and only occupy the space of one boat.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because ever since the X95 came out in 2020,
I couldn't actually put a finger on that. It's got to be at least 5 years ago.
Yeah, ever since that boat came out, I've been a big fan of that kind of arrangement of boat, even though it obviously involves all sorts of stabilization to make it sort of
and I probably ought to touch on that because there is a lot of weight up high. And it's always concerned me when you've seen anything, is that really going to work? That's an awful lot of weight and volume and windage up top.
Got kind of super tanker vibes, doesn't it?
Yes, a little bit. There is an element of the block of flats on it, but the beauty is that the stabilizers have got so good now that does offset a lot of the issues. And I did have a little bit of a wry smile when I realized that the stabilizer on the Ocean 156 is technically an option. But I think that would probably not be a good idea to spec it without one.
One they strongly recommend.
I think it's an option that they would strongly recommend. And frankly, if you're spending, 6 or 7 million on a really lovely boat of that size and scale, to then skimp on the extra, whatever it is, 100 grand or so for a stabilizer would not be a wise decision. And we did turn it off coming into the marina, we did turn it off and you could instantly feel the difference just in terms of, a little bit of roll, and the windage and all the rest of it. It's suddenly, it just would not be a good idea to order without it. I'm sure technically it's still safe and stable and everything else, but it just wouldn't be very comfortable.
Isn't it cool that these fresh stabilization technologies are enabling us to build boats like that, that take the game on to such a degree at that kind of length?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, anybody ordering a boat of that scale would now order one almost by default, because you would struggle to sell it on afterwards without. And it has changed the game. They're so good. And whether that's fin stabilizers or gyro stabilizers, it's just completely transforms it. And particularly when you're cruising in displacement mode, it's an absolute game changer, because previously you'd be, any kind of beam sea and you'd be rolling around. But they are so good now, both at anchor and underway, that it would be, foolhardy not to spec one on any boat over about 60, 70 feet now.
Well, I'll still be interested to know how the dynamic's going to work over the next few years in terms of the relationship between these voluminous tri-deck yachts and these big voluminous power cats. Because I suspect that they're going to there's going to be the buyer who kind of straddles those two sectors and is unsure as to which way to go. You seem less convinced by that.
I don't know. I don't think they're immediately comparable. Yes, in terms of volume, they share certain relationships, but I think people are likely to fall into one camp or the other. And I think if you want traditional monohull, not exactly styling, but certainly in terms of the volume and the aesthetic and the handling and everything else, then something like a tri-deck enables you to get an enormous amount of space within a relatively compact hull length. I think catamarans, they just feel different. The proportions are so different.
Yeah.
They're so wide. And the way the whole internal fit out works, because you've got sort of two separate hulls, they have their own distinct set of pros and cons. And I wouldn't come down hard one side or the other. I think people are going to have their favorites. But the thing I like about this particular tri-deck is that it just feels like it's totally maxed out on the whole concept. They've designed the whole thing to work as a tri-deck from the outset, and it just delivers. If you're looking for maximum volume, really good balance of inside outside space, lots of versatility in terms of layout, then it really delivers on it. If you're going to go down that route, you might as well go all the way down it rather than trying to.
Fully agree with that. Fully agree. Well done, Sunseeker. So that's the Sunseeker Ocean 156, and we go from a kind of self-drive super yacht, I guess, to something far more modest, because we're going to talk today about electric outboards. That's our product for this week.
Yeah.
And we are both big fans. We're not going to talk about all electric outboards. We're not going to talk about the most powerful ones, the high performance ones. And there are some. We're going to stick to portable electric outboards.
Yeah.
Because that's where we think they're the very best right now in terms of how much they can improve that element of your life, the way you apply them, the way you use them.
Absolutely. And I think we both feel the same way about this, is that, electric is all very well in terms of its sort of quietness and cleanness, and you can have a long debate about the eco sort of pros and cons. But the beauty about these smaller portable outboards, to me, is that the electric ones are just better in almost every regard than the petrol ones.
Yeah, so often if you've got a choice between the internal combustion and the electric, you kind of make allowances for the e-route in order to enable it to compete. You don't have to do that here, do you?
No, really not.
You compare it like for like, it's simply better, as you rightly say.
Yeah, they tend to be lighter, they tend to be cleaner, they tend to be, incredibly simple and user-friendly. There's, you don't have to tug away at the starter cord or worry about which way you put it down in case the oil flows through into the cylinders or the carburetor. You don't have to carry, extra tanks of fuel around. You don't have to worry about whether you've remembered to do up the little air valve at the top.
Exactly.
You don't have to worry about whether you've winterized it in the winter.
And then that's to say nothing of the fact that I can, you get yourself a 4 horsepower portable. I'm going to do that. I've never done that, but portable, inverted commas, portable 4-stroke outboard. They ain't portable. 25 kilos don't seem like a lot, but you try lifting it. It's the most awkward shape in the world. And it breaks collarbones and smashes rib cages, doesn't it?
If you drop it, doesn't it?
But it's just so tough to shift. So portable it is not. But you've written an article about this quite recently, haven't you?
Well, I've tried lots of different ones, and I've borrowed them for sort of a couple of weeks here and there, and I just like everything about them. You know, they're much easier to look after. They're just minimal maintenance, minimal hassle, really user friendly. You know, happily let your kid go out and use one. They're just better, I think. And I like the fact that you can get everything from a kind of super lightweight one. I mean, there's one I borrowed called I wasn't quite so sure about the name, something called a Thrust Me Kicker, which sounds a bit more like a sort of weird sex toy than an outboard engine. But other than that slight embarrassment, you might not want to admit what it's called. It is just fantastically light. It was 4.7 kilos.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it?
And it's a sort of 1 kilowatt thrust, so it's sort of equivalent to sort of 1.5, 2 horsepower there or thereabouts. But for most purposes, enough. The battery is sort of built into the actual shaft. So incredibly sort of light and self-contained, not too expensive. It's about
but that means you can't presumably remove and replace the battery or take a second battery with you.
No. And that is the limiting factor of that one. And it's not hugely powerful, but if you're just going to and from a boat on a swing mooring, or, you know, getting into the pontoon, if you've put it out on a mid-river pontoon or a mooring, whatever it is, perfectly good enough. You don't need an enormous amount of power or range. But then if you do need more, go on. Well, then then there are sort of alternatives that you can get replaceable batteries. So
yes, but before we move on to those, could you just confront the elephant in the room and tell me what the price of your Thrust Me Kicker would be?
Well, that particular one is about 1,100 quid, which, you know, a little bit more than a very cheap sort of 1.5, 2 horsepower.
It's kind of double, isn't it?
Yes, it probably is double, but, you know, and okay, fuel is not going to be an enormous expense on something like that. But I think for the convenience and the lightness and the portability, I think that is a premium worth paying. And then, some of the other ones, Torqeedo were one of the first into the market. Really lovely piece of engineering, that very elegant looking design, packs down into a really nice little portable carry case. You have got a replaceable battery on that. So I think the ideal setup is you have one that you're sort of using on the boat, and then the other can always be charging, whether that's in the marina or on the boat itself. And that way you can have a pretty easy sort of, you know, swap when you need to. You never run out of juice. You have a pretty decent range, pretty decent power. There's lots of different sort of specs of that depending on how much you want to spend.
It's quite interesting though in terms of Torqeedo and their story, because they're based in Germany, aren't they? I've visited their headquarters out there, and it wasn't so much building something in relation to a drive for eco-friendliness. It was more practical than that, as you maybe expect of the Germans. You just weren't allowed internal combustion on the lakes of the region or in Austria. So they had to come up with something that worked well. And having visited their quarters, they dot every I. It's tremendous. There's a room where they've got basically every electric outboard you can possibly get from every manufacturer. And they just take the small detail and improve it, take the small detail and improve it. And it shows, doesn't it, in their packages quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And they haven't just replaced a petrol powerhead with an electric one. They've completely rethought the whole look and functionality of it. It's a really elegant piece of design, works very nicely. And there's sort of more unusual ones. There's this company called Remigo that have produced one where effectively they've, rather than having a traditional outboard sort of shaft running down it, sort of circular tube, they have built the whole thing in the shape of a rudder.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So you've got fantastic sort of steerability because the actual shape of the outboard helps it to steer. Again, it's taking advantage of that shape to actually fit the battery in that. They've created quite a clever use of the way that the handle works. So the actual shaft of the sort of rudder, if you like, can slide up and down it. So you can adjust the shaft length to suit your boat absolutely perfectly. You don't have to set it to one setting. And then the handle becomes sort of doubles up as a carry handle. So the whole thing folds, and then it just means it's really nicely balanced. So you can carry the whole thing in one hand.
Imagine that, carrying an outboard like a briefcase.
Imagine trying to carry a 3 or 5 horsepower engine in one hand, let alone 2.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So really clever thinking, and for 90% of the usage, it's not going to replace a Williams jet tender. You can't ski behind it. You'll struggle to plane with most of them. But if you're happy at displacement speeds, I mean, let's have a look at some of these. You know, ePropulsion, another company, little bit like Torqeedo, bit cheaper, but you know, you can buy one of their ePropulsion lights, another really lightweight one. That's about £1,000. torpedo.
Yeah, well, can I just stop you there,
Yeah.
actually? Because the e-propulsion E-Light, that particular motor, well, in response to our first ever podcast, a guy called Stephen Merkett got back to us and started a discussion. He said that, I think we were talking about tenders at the time. Yeah. He said he owns 2 Easy Raft tenders on Axopar 28s. So space is obviously at a premium on boats of that size. And he's really, really delighted with those little electric outboards. He says, and I'm quoting, powered by the compact and ultralight e-propulsion E-Light Elite. Have I just pronounced Elite E-Light?
I think I did that actually. Maybe I missed that entirely because I was thinking e-propulsion. It must be an E-Light. But
brilliant.
Well, do you see what they've done there? E-Light, Elite.
I do now.
Very
he
clever.
says he saw 4 knots with 3 grown-ups on board. It impressed him with ease of installation, twist grip, direction and proportional speed control and intuitive display. So he just loves it.
Yeah.
You're looking forward to 2025 with a couple of brilliant tenders on his
if you've got a
boats.
small compact tender, you want a small compact engine to go with it.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's a nice light engine. 6.7 kilos. That'll give you about 1.5 hours cruising, about 9 kilometre range. In a small tender, you don't need to be doing more than that.
Exactly right. It sounds ludicrously modest, doesn't it? But you've got to change your mindset and understand what you actually intend to do with your tender.
Yeah. When have you ever done more than 9 kilometres in a tiny inflatable tender? You just don't need it. So long as you keep it fully charged, really not an issue.
Exactly. Have we mentioned servicing? Or the absence thereof?
Oh, well, exactly. I don't think there is anything to mention because there's just very little involved. There's not really anything to go wrong. There's no oil to change. You don't need to worry about, water getting trapped in there and freezing and cracking the cylinder head. I've had that with a little Honda 5 horsepower outboard on the sailing boat. I didn't drain it out properly. The shed it was in dropped well below freezing, and you get just a little bit, water in the sort of cooling cylinder head, freezes, cracks the entire block. So there's just many ways which just makes life easier for you, and they're going to start. You switch it on, you press the button, you go. How many times have you done that with a 2 or a 4-stroke outboard engine? You get there and you're tugging away, and then you realize your fuel's gone stale, or you've forgotten to open the tap, or I know.
It is so easy, isn't
it? And then
it
kicks back and tries to throw you overboard.
Exactly. There's just nothing to go wrong here, is there? And actually, you did bring it home to me a little bit earlier. We were having a cup of tea chatting about electric outboards, and I was talking to you about the servicing of them, because I've never owned an electric outboard. And you're saying, well, when's the last time you took your electric strimmer out of your shed and got that serviced? You just don't do it. You just start it once a season and it goes.
Exactly.
Completely reliable, completely free.
And the fact that they are so easy just means you're more inclined to use it more often for little trips. I to my shame, I have still got a petrol outboard, but I never bother putting it on the tender because it's just too much hassle and too much weight. And given that my boat is only a kind of 5-minute row away, it's just less hassle to row than it is to get the outboard out. Whereas if you've got a little electric one, whenever I've borrowed one, you use that the entire time. You just whack it on, go,
it
job
makes
done.
all the difference in the world. It'd take any excuse not to do a thing if it's just awkward or difficult or painful, won't you? And that's it. So what we're saying is we'd be surprised if anyone ever sold an internal combustion outboard of less than 10 horsepower ever again.
Unless the price is just too much, or you want to go quickly, because ultimately they don't have the power. You can get nice little planing tenders that you might need more oomph for, and then you get to the stage where the weight of the battery outweighs it. But for 90% of the time on a small inflatable tender, if you're happy going displacement speeds, I would absolutely go electric rather than petrol now.
Completely agree. Isn't that lovely?
Oh dear,
I know.
shocking.
What a thing. So electric outboards, portable electric outboards, absolutely brilliant these days, well worth investing in. But we'll leave those alone now and move on to our issue of the day, which is boat building materials.
Yeah, specifically, I think hull materials as much as anything.
Yeah. There's plenty out there.
There are, rather more than I sort of thought, because so much of the market is dominated by fiberglass or glass fiber or GRP or composite or whatever you want to call it. But there's many other choices to make if you want to. I jotted a few of them down here.
But we're starting with fiberglass.
Well, let's start with fiberglass because that is the most common form. But then there's fiberglass and there's fiberglass, isn't there? So you can have sandwich composites. You can have what's it called?
Vacuum infusion. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there are some obvious benefits to it. It's relatively cheap.
It's very pretty.
Very pretty. You can have whatever shape you like. It's pretty indestructible, which has its pros and cons.
It definitely has its cons, doesn't it?
On the plus side, it's very unlikely to corrode. Ultimately, you can get osmosis if you leave it in for years and years and years, but relatively speaking,
we all know it does a great job. But is there a clear way to recycle it these days? I mean, I've heard people talking about recycling old boat hulls to turn into road surfacing, some sort of material that's been investigated. But you hear these ideas and you never actually discover whether they took off, whether they gained traction. But what you do see, and what you can't avoid, is when you're going up and down various estuaries around England, you see little old wooden boats that have rotted rather elegantly, poetically into the stringers and the ribs like a corpse in the mud. And then you see a virtually untouched, a pristine, fiberglass hull. Well, dirty, but complete.
Yeah, because they do not
sticking out of the mud, going nowhere. I know, like nuclear waste, just going absolutely nowhere whatsoever. Which, it probably puts a bit of a downer on it for some people these days, I think.
It's going to become a problem. I think, so far, the boats sort of, even old boats still have a value to someone, and they eventually turn into houseboats or garden sheds or whatever else. But it is increasingly going to become an issue that there are a lot of large, expensive boats which are going to get too expensive to sort of keep up and will eventually get old and tired and sad. And then it's a big lump of fiberglass to get rid of. So it's definitely going to start becoming an issue. And that's where some of the other hull materials start to look surprisingly attractive on that level, as well as many others. So
before we just leap off of fiberglass, can I just ask you and anyone else listening whether it's just me that gets genuinely excited by the smell of resins in fiberglass factories?
No, I'm pretty sure that's just you.
Is it just me? I get the butterflies. I get excited. I get excited in the same way I get excited when I smell two-stroke. Do you know what I mean?
All right. Yeah.
It's quite a thing. But
look, and there's a certain amount there's a bit of a sort of new boat smell about things, isn't there? Like a new car smell. It's sort of, but I think that might be a passing moment.
Shouldn't have mentioned that, should I? All right, let's move on to aluminium, because I'm a huge fan of aluminium. I think aluminium should have gained traction in the UK long, long ago, long before it did. And arguably, it still hasn't as much as it should have done, because it's so practical. And for proof of that, just go to Finland, to Norway, to Sweden, where they use aluminium all over the place as nations that own more boats than pretty much anywhere else in the world per capita. People who actually will commute to their islands, commute to their jobs on boats, whose kids go out and use boats from the age of 4, 5, 6, use boats every day and don't tolerate bad boats. Aluminium is everywhere, and it's not by accident, is it?
No, I mean, it has a number of obvious advantages. It's very light, it's very strong, it's relatively easy to recycle. So, you can get your boat made out of recycle the aluminium that's already been recycled. And of course, at the end of life, you can just cut it up and melt it down and effectively create a new one. Yeah,
it's good to customize a boat with as well, isn't it? Because you're using plates instead of molds. You can deviate to a far greater degree.
So you don't have to invest in the molds in the first place. You can choose where you want to put the bulkheads, because the structural integrity and particularly the rigidity of a GRP boat is dependent as much on that kind of monocoque structure, where the bulkheads actually provide some of the rigidity, because they all, a fiberglass boat will flex a little bit and move. And that's why you need these bulkheads to give it the rigidity. Whereas there is enough strength in steel and aluminium boats that effectively you can be much more
gung-ho.
You have much greater flexibility as to where you put them or where you need them. Yeah. You still have to have a certain amount of reinforcement. But on the other hand, that is one of the kind of drawbacks, that you basically are designing out of flat sheets of metal, and that does limit the shape. So.
It does. And it's pertinent, because I went to test an Aquaspirit last week, an Aquaspirit 7-meter rib down in Plymouth. Great bunch of guys, really good boats built in Ukraine.
With an aluminium hull.
With an aluminium hull, yeah. And I was I'd seen some drawings and some pictures and read a little bit, and I was kind of expecting a stepped hull. And I was saying to you before I went, I've never seen an aluminium boat with a stepped hull because the shapes are just too complex and difficult for the aluminium construction process. And when I got there, it turned out I was completely wrong. Not a stepped hull at all. So there you are.
Yeah,
it's absolutely true.
And you can still get, there are some very beautiful aluminium boats out there, but rather from the likes of Mulder and so on. But the only way they can achieve that really smooth, curved look is to put an enormous amount of fairing and paint over the top of it all to basically cover up the sort of flat sheets and the mold, the welt and everything else.
Or quite interestingly, to combine two boat building materials like Yammering Cross and various other brands did, where you got the aluminium hull for all its various benefits we've discussed, and then you got the beautiful, slick, leisure-friendly cleanliness of fiberglass topsides.
Yes, yeah.
Which works well. I mean, I have...
Or liners, sometimes you have the whole cockpit effectively made
exactly, the decks and everything. So it's there's merit in that, though I have heard some people question the longevity of that kind of dynamic where you've got different materials joining and they react differently to impacts. And so over time, you can it causes difficulties.
And also the electrolytic corrosion you can sort of set up. And I do know someone actually who made the mistake of putting a copper-based anti-fouling on a little aluminium tender.
Didn't go well.
No, it basically turned into a sieve, which is great if you want to strain your vegetables. Less good if you want to go boating in one.
Yes.
Because it will set up an electrolytic reaction and effectively the aluminium fizzes away.
Yeah.
So you have got to be careful. And I think some people are concerned about that. But
that white powdery oxidation you see on hulls that have been around for a bit, that's not a problem though, is it?
No, it's a natural oxidation process, and that will create a kind of a neutral barrier that effectively will protect the boat. There's some really high class builders who've been building super yachts out of aluminium for years. So if you do it right, it's really not an issue. You just need to be a little bit selective about what type of anti-fouling you use.
Yes, exactly. So look, I think they're fantastic. Whenever I've had a fiberglass boat, I've stuck aluminium keel bands on because I want to beach it.
Yeah.
The whole bloody thing's made of aluminium. If you get an aluminium boat, you do what you like with it.
Yeah, they're super robust. They're, very nice knockabout. And I rather like the kind of aesthetic of that slightly sort of semi-commercial or military type look where it looks a little bit roughy-tufty. And
so do I.
And there's some really cool boats also.
There are
some of the best boats I've ever driven.
What's your favourite in terms of aluminium?
Well, there's one that really sticks out, something called a Vigo C10. I
remember that.
Which, really nice... focused aluminium wheelhouse boat from a Scandinavian manufacturer.
With a windscreen like that.
Really powerful.
Undercut, facing forward, inverted.
Absolutely. And it was a bit basic inside, but it went like absolute shit off a shovel.
Yeah.
Handled superbly. It was just a thing of loveliness.
It was.
Then, lots of those exos.
I'm glad you mentioned them. I love an exo.
Yeah.
That Defender 9 I had with twin 225s on the back we took across the Baltic. Yeah. What a boat. What a brilliant boat. And I thought that was a spectacular driving machine. It was in a way, but it was kind of trumped when they brought out the little Defender 8, I think it was, which is as much like a go-kart on the water as I've ever seen. Nice long keel, so it just grip and goes. Fantastic.
And they wrap them, don't they, in vinyl, I think, on the outside.
They do to make them look pretty.
Yeah.
But there's one thing we should mention is aluminium does have a reputation for being a bit noisy, doesn't it? You've got to kind of line it with foam.
Yeah.
To prevent it
because it transmits sound.
Yeah, it does like a little drum.
And that is one of the advantages of the kind of composite build, because it has a little bit of flex and it acts as a little bit of a natural deadener. You need to be a bit more cautious. Plenty of other options. There's steel boats, of course.
Yeah, we should move on to that. We've only done 2 materials. There's about 48 to get through.
No, there's not.
There's about 5, I think, in there. Yeah. But still, I'm a big fan. I owned a steel boat. It was a narrow boat, so it was always going to be a canal boat, 60-footer, beautiful thing. Sheffield steel, one of the last that was built that way, and it was spectacular. I lived on there for 5 years with the missus and our young child. Just loved it. I was really worried because we were plugged in a lot to shore power. I was worried about corrosion. I didn't want to ruin the home that I lived in, this beautiful boat, and I fitted it out a treat, blood, sweat and tears into it. So blacked it, Lots of anodes, got a galvanic isolator. Still don't understand really what that does. I mean, I've got it written here. It prevents electrolytic corrosion by blocking low voltage DC currents that enter your boat via the shore power earth wire. Now, I probably read that before I bought this thing. Cost me £200, and it's one of those. It's like the Emperor's.
Did it work its magic, as far as you know?
Well, that's it. It's a little box you put on the wall and plug in, and you think, is that worth £200?
Well, it is. If it stops your boat.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, my boat was absolutely perfect. Whether it had been perfect without it, I don't know, but. There are ways to look after it, but look, it's tough and it's heavy and
it
it's
gives you a sort of air
long-lasting.
of indestructibility about it. And if you're, exploring the waterways of Europe, some of those lovely Dutch steel cruisers, lovely things. They're so quiet. They're so sturdy. You can sort of go in and out of locks without worrying too much. You always know you're going to be the biggest, heaviest thing in there. So
you do, but interesting. You mentioned weight, and that's a part of the appeal of them in my book. So hulls made of steel, but very often you'll get topsides made of aluminium.
Yep.
To reduce that elevated weight, which makes all kinds of sense. So again, aluminium rears its fabulously beautiful head. Big fan of that. But yeah, there's some gorgeous stuff coming out of Holland. Love steel.
Yep. If it's done well, I think it's and it's for the right kind of boat. You obviously can't build a planing boat out of steel with any conviction.
Does that mean I'm not allowed to talk about concrete boats?
No, ferro cement things.
Yeah.
I mean, has there ever been a decent motorboat made out of that?
I shouldn't think so. I just love the idea of getting me polyfiller out to sort out a crack. Brilliant.
Not sure I want a motorboat.
Let's move on to something more exotic. Now, you've got much more experience in this than I have, carbon fibre, because you were just on that Say 52, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of a rare beast, but again, a little bit like aluminium, but even more so. It's incredibly lightweight and incredibly stiff and strong as a material to build a boat out of. So this particular Say 52 weighs 7.5 tons. And now to put that in perspective, a Princess V50 weighs 17 tons.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, it's well under half the weight. And that makes an enormous difference. It means that you can power this 52-foot sports cruiser with a pair of relatively modest 440 horsepower diesel engines on stern drives, I should add. And it still does well over 40 knots. So you can get away with much smaller engines. That has sort of knock-on benefits in terms of fuel efficiency, in terms of packaging. You need a smaller footprint. So really interesting. And it can work. It does.
It can work.
It can do. I mean, it's not without its drawbacks. Obviously, carbon fibre is expensive as a material. It's quite difficult to work with. To get the really lovely sort of glossy finish, you need to have a big oven effectively to bake it in. It's also really, really stiff. So on occasions, I've been on carbon boats where it just feels too unforgiving. It's because it's so light, and particularly the noise from the hulls. It's very, very thin in relation to its strength, so you don't need much of it. So it effectively feels a bit like you're driving in a very taut drum.
And the punishment is totally unmediated. Is it straight into your backside? It properly hurts when you land hard.
Yeah, if you get it wrong. But most of the boats, they do have quite deep V's on them. But noisy.
There's a limit. When you talk about deep V's, you talk about lightweight boats. I like a bit of weight to a boat because it's generally more comfortable. And of course, a deeper V helps in terms of the softness of re-entry. But a fast, really lightweight boat is going to hurt on re-entry almost regardless of how deep that V is.
But to be fair, that Say 52 actually went really well through the waves and didn't feel particularly, or even sound particularly different to a GRP boat. So I think there are ways of mitigating it if you sort of insulate it correctly and get your noise sort of either sort of balance or cancellation or whatever you want to call it right.
Get some then suspension seats as well, perhaps.
I did this one out. I can't remember if it did, but I don't think it did. But it felt absolutely fine. But definitely, I've spent nights sleeping on board a carbon fibre boat before, and that was notably noisier just from the little tickle of waves on the chines,
which
and so on.
I kind of love, but a lot of people hate, and I'll see why. But look, let's move from the exotic to, well, I guess exotic in a different way. Wood.
Wood,
What about that?
Well, I think that's been unfairly overlooked. I mean, really, it is the ultimate kind of sustainable boat building material. And they've been doing it for years. Obviously, for a while, I had a number of disadvantages, and I think it's got a bit of a bad rep because of that.
Yeah.
You do need to look after it and maintain it. But equally, now there are ways to get over a lot of that. So
It's true, but I do think that modern people eye wood with suspicion to a degree in relation to boats. Think, I can't handle that. That's a bit of a liability. That's a bit of, I don't know enough to take care of this stuff. But in terms of the driving experience of a wooden powerboat, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel every time I'm on one, like there's a tangible difference. It's almost like enjoying vinyl music rather than listening to digital coding. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Going analog.
Going analog. There's a kind of, there's a faint softness and flex to it that's rather lovely. Not flex, but you know what I mean?
And it's a beautiful natural material.
It is.
And a really good boat building material. And I mean, look how many classic boats you see that are around. And you do question, are there going to be 100-year-old glass fibre boats knocking about? Because ultimately it's like Trigger's boom. It's sort of, endlessly repairable, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can replace planks, you can add bits, you can sand them down, you can revarnish them. But also, there are people, but, Spirit Yachts is a case in point. They still build their boats out of wood and they treat it with epoxy. So it effectively looks much like from the outside, it looks much like a GRP boat. It behaves like one in terms of a lot of the maintenance and so on.
Yep.
It's an impermeable barrier effectively that protects the wood. But it's beautiful thing it's really a beautiful thing to behold them actually being built.
It's a stunning thing, isn't it?
Proper craftsman, building a whole, it is a bit like that, creating the skeleton and then putting the planking around it. And then that final layer of epoxy that protects it all. But it's it's almost like a living, breathing thing.
Special, isn't it?
Oh, really lovely.
It is special.
And they produce some proper power boats. And
I'm going to deviate from our listed materials here because I know you won't like this one, and you'll probably say that this is not special at all. You might have a point in relation to wood. It's not concrete. It's polyethylene. Now look here.
Is that kind of rotor-molded thing?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
rotor-molded polyethylene. Now, look, again, I'm mentioning this because, it's not a big boat material.
Yeah.
Because I think because of the construction process where you heat it up in kind of a rotating drum and create the mold. But they use it a lot in the Nordic states. Brands like Pioneer, Wally, Terry. I tested a Terry 475 bow rider, which was fabulous.
Yeah.
I would have bought that any day of the week. Real knockabout stuff.
Yeah.
Just so simple.
The thing they make kayaks out of,
They do,
mostly?
So it's tough, it's impact proof, it's cheap.
Yeah.
The pigment runs all the way through. So if you scuff it, you don't see any mark and you can just mend it with your iron, just melt it into itself. It's brilliant. It's
I'd like to see
resistant
that.
to chemicals.
Alex ironing his boat after. You don't even iron your shirt. I can't see you ironing a boat.
Dare you? That tomato stain down there as well. It's UV resistant, which is useful for a boat as well, isn't it? It's easy to mold into complex shapes. It's 100% recyclable. Just melt it down, go again.
Is it really that easy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's used a lot for commercial boats, of course, which tells you it's very practical. But that's probably part of the reason why it's not used so much for leisure boats, because they look at that and think it doesn't really light the flame.
It's not very sexy, is it? Because it hasn't got any kind of gloss to it. So it looks a bit sort of...
No, there's no getting away from it.
Looks like a toy.
It's plastic. It's recyclable plastic, but and it only tends to go up sort of 5-6 meters. But look at those brands I'm talking about. If you don't know them already, look them up online. Pioneer, Pioneer, Wally with an H after the W, and Terry with an H after the R. Complicated spelling.
A lot of silent H's going on.
I know, that's the Nordic people for you, but they're brilliant. And it shouldn't be discounted. Certainly not for just sort of novice-friendly family use or for tender use as well.
Up to
really
kind of,
good stuff.
5, 6, 7 meters
That's
maximum.
right.
Yeah.
Because they're great fun, unintimidating, can knock them about a bit and they'll come back for more.
Fair enough. I think that's probably the main ones, isn't it? I think anything beyond that is getting a little bit too niche. But it does just go to show that there's a lot more to it than just automatically going for a composite fiberglass boat. There are still some really interesting alternatives out there.
Yeah, there really are. And once again, we'd like to hear your opinions on this. Please do leave us a comment on your favoured boat building material, any experiences you had with each. And we'll try to get back to you. And certainly if you've got recommendations, we'll try to introduce those subjects into future podcasts. But for now, please do leave a like and join us next week for another podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for watching.